What would you do if saving your grandmother's life meant marrying a man trapped in a coma? Amaka is forced into a shocking marriage with a billionaire who cannot even open his eyes. But when she unexpectedly becomes the mother of his triplets, the family turns against her. Whispers of betrayal, plots of danger, and the fight for survival push her into a world she never imagined until the unthinkable happens. Before we dive into this unforgettable tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Luxury Tales by SK family. Subscribe now, and let's begin this incredible journey together. It was a hospital bill. The total glared back at her in bold black print, far beyond anything she could earn in a lifetime selling fabric at Tejuosho Market. She had counted the digits over and over again, hoping they would somehow shrink. They did not. From the adjoining room came a faint cough, thin and broken like the snapping of dry twigs. Amaka's heart clenched. "Mama Ngozi?" she called softly, standing up quickly. She found her grandmother half sitting, half slumped on the old mattress, her hand pressed to her chest. "Don't mind me, Mama whispered, her voice hoarse but full of the stubbornness that had carried her through wars, poverty, and widowhood. "It's just this my old body complaining again." Amaka forced a smile, though her throat tightened. She helped her grandmother sit up properly, tucking a pillow behind her and adjusting the wrapper that had slipped from her frail shoulders. "You need to rest, Mama. Tomorrow I'll try again at the bank. Maybe someone will listen." But they both knew it was a lie. She had begged, pleaded, and been turned away more times than she could count. Even her mother's wedding jewelry, which she had pawned in desperation, barely made a dent in the costs, and time was slipping through their fingers like sand. That night, while the city outside buzzed with generators, laughter from beer parlors, and the ever-present honking of okadas, Amaka sat in darkness. The candle on her small wooden table had melted down to a stub. She was still staring at the hospital bill when she heard it. 3 sharp knocks at the door. Her heart jumped. It was late. No one visited her at that hour. She hesitated before opening the creaky wooden door. Standing there was a tall man in a perfectly tailored black suit, holding an umbrella to shield himself from the drizzle. He looked completely out of place in her rundown neighborhood. His shoes gleamed even in the weak light from the corridor bulb. "Miss Amaka Okoye," he asked, his accent crisp, his tone formal. "Yes," she answered slowly, her fingers tightening around the doorframe. "I represent the family of Chief Obinna Eze." The name struck her like thunder. Everyone in Lagos knew that name. Chief Obinna was one of the richest industrialists in the country, owner of oil blocks, shipping lines, and real estate that stretched from Banana Island to Abuja. His face had been on the cover of magazines, his companies at the center of endless gossip. Amaka frowned in confusion. "What business would the Eze family have with me?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he handed her a sealed envelope, heavy and smooth beneath her fingers. Embossed on the flap were the golden initials OE. "Read it carefully," he said. "My instructions are to wait for your answer." Amaka's hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a letter printed on thick paper. She read the words once, then again, her eyes widening. It was a marriage proposal. The family was offering to cover all her grandmother's medical bills, locally and abroad, on one condition: she would marry Chief Obinna. Her lips parted in disbelief. She remembered the newspapers from 2 months ago. Chief Obinna had collapsed during a board meeting and had not woken since. He was alive but trapped in a coma. Her eyes darted back to the letter. Marry a man who cannot even open his eyes, who cannot speak, laugh, or touch. The suited man cleared his throat, watching her carefully. "I know this must sound unusual, but the family wishes it to be so. If you agree, your grandmother will be treated immediately." Amaka's knees nearly gave way. She clutched the doorframe to steady herself. Behind her, Mama coughed again, weaker this time. The sound was a reminder sharper than any blade. Amaka pressed the letter to her chest, her mind spinning. That night, long after the visitor had gone, she sat in the dark with the rain dripping steadily outside. A billion thoughts circled in her head, none of them making sense. How could she marry a stranger? A man who might never wake? Why would his powerful family want her of all people? But the biggest question was one she could not silence. Could she really refuse when her grandmother's life hung in the balance? The next morning, Lagos woke restless as always. From her window, Amaka watched the city stretch awake. Hawkers were already calling out goods, pure water, gala, hot bread. Yellow Danfo buses screeched at every stop, the conductors dangling dangerously from the sides as they shouted for passengers. The air smelled of roasted corn, petrol fumes, and wet earth from last night's storm. Life in Lagos had no pause button. But for Amaka, time felt frozen. The letter lay on her small wooden table, its words staring back at her like a ghost. She had read it 10, 20 times, and it refused to make sense. Marry a man who was alive but absent. Become a wife without a husband, a bride without a groom. Maka, her grandmother's weak voice broke through her thoughts. Why are you frowning like someone carrying Lagos traffic on her head? Amaka quickly folded the letter and slipped it under a book. She forced a smile as she entered Mama Ngozi's room, balancing a tray of steaming pap and akara. Good morning, Mama. How are you feeling? Mama's sharp eyes studied her. Even with sickness stealing her strength, she still carried the wisdom of her 65 years. I asked how you are feeling, not me. Amaka placed the tray down and adjusted the pillows. I'm fine, Mama, just thinking too much. Mama hummed knowingly. You forget that I raised you. When you were small, your lies used to finish before your tongue. She chuckled softly, but then coughed, a sound that rattled Amaka's bones. The tray shook in Amaka's hands. She wanted to scream, to tell her grandmother about the letter, about the impossible choice. But how could she? How could she burden her with such madness? By afternoon, the suited man returned. But this time he wasn't alone. A sleek black SUV idled at the gate, its tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. Neighbors peered from behind curtains and doorways, their whispers buzzing louder than the generator next door. Amaka, who is that? One woman hissed, balancing a basin of tomatoes on her hip. Government people? Another added, maybe it is EFCC. Maka, what did you do? Heat rushed to Amaka's face as she hurried to meet the visitors. The man in the suit stepped forward, flanked by a woman in a pencil skirt and heels that clicked like gunshots against the wet cement. The woman carried a clipboard, her face sharp and unreadable. Miss Okoye, the man greeted, I trust you had time to consider our proposal. Amaka's heart pounded. It is too much. I don't understand why your people would come to me. The woman with the clipboard spoke for the first time, her tone brisk. Because you are suitable. You have no ties, no scandals, no competing claims. You are ordinary enough to be invisible, yet desperate enough to accept. The words stung, but they weren't lies. Amaka swallowed, her throat dry. But why marry a man who cannot even— Chief Obina's condition is stable, the woman cut in smoothly. But the family needs to secure his legacy. You will be his legal wife with all the protections and responsibilities that title carries. In return, your grandmother's treatment will be immediate and comprehensive, abroad if necessary. Amaka's chest tightened. Abroad. A word that glittered like hope and weighed like chains. The man in the suit gestured toward the SUV. Please, come with us. You should see him for yourself. Her legs felt like stone, but she followed. Inside the SUV, the leather seat smelled of wealth, of a life far removed from her own. They drove across the third mainland bridge, the lagoon stretching endlessly on both sides, hawkers risking their lives between lanes of impatient cars. Amaka barely noticed. Her mind was spinning. The private hospital on Victoria Island was a different world. Glass walls gleamed, marble floors reflected every step, and nurses moved like silent shadows. Armed guards stood discreetly at corners, their eyes scanning everything. At the end of a hushed corridor, they stopped. The door opened, and Amaka's breath caught. There he was, Chief Obina Eze, the man who had appeared in newspapers, on television, shaking hands with governors and foreign investors, the man whose wealth was a story told in every market and beer parlor. Now he lay silent, motionless, machines keeping rhythm with his breath. Amaka stepped closer. His skin was smooth, his frame broad, even under the hospital sheets. He looked younger than she expected, no more than late 30s. Handsome, powerful once, but now as still as a statue. She felt something twist inside her chest. Was this life? Was this fate? To be bound to a man who might never wake, who would never hear her voice, never call her name. The lawyer cleared his throat and slid the papers onto a small table beside the bed. "Sign here, Miss Okoye. Once you do, you are Mrs. Amaka Eze, his legal wife, his heir's mother if children come in the future." Her hand shook as she picked up the pen. Through the glass window she could see Lagos glittering in the distance, a city of wealth and poverty, laughter and sorrow, hope and despair. Her grandmother's cough echoed in her mind. With trembling fingers, Amaka lowered the pen. It wasn't just a signature, it was a surrender, a leap into mystery. And as the ink stained the page, one thought burned in her chest. Why me? Why, out of all the women in Nigeria, had this powerful family chosen her? The wedding was nothing like Amaka had dreamed as a girl. There was no lace gown shimmering in sunlight, no dancing in a village square with friends spraying naira notes, no ululations echoing into the evening air. Instead, it was two signatures on crisp legal papers, a priest muttering hurried vows in a hospital chapel, and her hand placed on a man who could not respond. When the ceremony ended, the lawyer offered her a polite smile. "Congratulations, Mrs. A." The words felt foreign, like clothes too big for her to wear. She wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Back in Surulere, news traveled faster than wildfire. Neighbors gathered at her compound, whispering and speculating. "Amaka Don Hammer," one man exclaimed, chewing roasted groundnuts. "She marry billionaire just like that." "Which billionaire?" another scoffed. "The Mande Coma. A beg, no be marriage be that, na business deal." Business or not, she don't escape poverty. Her mama go chop life now. The gossip stung, but Amaka kept her head down. She had made her choice, for mama, for survival. Within a week, her grandmother was transferred to a private ward in the same hospital as Chief Obina. The doctors spoke in crisp English, their words carrying confidence Amaka had never heard in government hospitals. They ran tests she didn't even know existed. For the first time in months, Mama looked comfortable, even smiling faintly as she teased the nurses. But comfort for Mama meant discomfort for Amaka. She was moved into the Eze mansion on Banana Island, a palace of glass and marble overlooking the sea. Chandeliers glittered in every room, the air smelled of imported perfume and polished wood, and servants bowed as she passed. Yet beneath the beauty lurked shadows. Chief Obina's relatives were not pleased. At the family's first gathering, Amaka felt their eyes on her like knives. Elegant women in ghil and lace eyed her simple Ankara dress with disdain. Men in agbada spoke in low tones, their laughter sharp. One of them, a tall woman with skin like polished mahogany, finally addressed her directly. "So this is the girl," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "The nobody from Surulere who now calls herself Mrs. Eze." Amaka lowered her gaze. "I did not come here for wealth, I only—" The woman raised a hand. "Spare us your humility. Just know this family does not forget who is real blood and who is not." The warning was clear. At night in her new room, Amaka cried silently. The silk sheets felt cold, the walls too wide, the silence too heavy. She would sit by Chief Obina's bed, whispering her fears into the quiet. He never moved, never answered, but strangely, talking to him gave her strength. "Do you know what they call me?" she whispered one evening, her fingers tracing the outline of his hand. "Gold digger, stranger, but they don't know the truth. I did this for Mama, for her life, not for money." The machines beeped steadily, indifferent. Still, she found comfort in his presence. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, she began to notice changes in herself. The nausea came first, then the fainting spells. When the doctor confirmed it, her world tilted on its axis. "You are pregnant, Mrs. Eze," he announced, "and not with one child, 3. Triplets." Her breath caught. She staggered, gripping the edge of the table. It felt impossible, like life had played one final trick on her. She was carrying the airs of a man who had never once touched her, never once spoken her name. The family's reaction was explosive. Some shouted in disbelief, others whispered furiously in corners. The same tall woman who had insulted her before now hissed openly, "She must have tricked us. How can a man in coma father children? This is fraud." The lawyer, however, stood firm. It was possible. Certain procedures were arranged long before Chief's illness, and the children are his without doubt. But doubt lingered in every stare Amaka received. In the mansion, whispers followed her steps. Servants bowed but exchanged glances behind her back. Relatives stopped speaking when she entered a room. At night, fear curled around her like smoke. She wasn't just fighting for Mama anymore. She was fighting for the 3 lives growing inside her. And somewhere deep down, beneath the fear and loneliness, a question she dared not voice began to stir. What if he never wakes up? What kind of future awaited her and these children? The Harmattan winds swept through Lagos that December, carrying dust that coated everything in a fine layer of brown. In the mansion on Banana Island, the chandeliers glittered as usual, but Amaka felt no warmth beneath their light. She was in her 6th month of pregnancy now, her belly round and heavy, her steps slower. The doctors praised her strength, marveling at how well she carried 3 children. But in the privacy of her room, she often sat by the window, staring at the ocean waves crashing against the rocks. She felt small, fragile, like a shell that might break at any moment. The relatives hadn't softened. If anything, they grew colder. When she walked into the dining hall, conversations stopped. When she touched her swollen belly, their eyes narrowed, as if daring her to prove the children inside belonged to the great Chief Obina. But what hurt most wasn't their contempt, it was the silence of the man she was supposed to call husband. Every evening, Amaka found herself in his hospital room. The private suite was filled with the steady hum of machines, the faint hiss of oxygen, the beeping that reminded her he was alive, even if only barely. She would drag a chair to his bedside, sit down, and begin to talk. At first, her words were awkward, stumbling over themselves, but soon they became her lifeline. She told him everything, how the family mocked her, how the servants whispered, how the loneliness inside the mansion pressed down on her chest until she could hardly breathe. "Sometimes," she whispered one night, her hand resting on his still one, "I wonder if I'm going mad, talking to a man who cannot hear me, loving a man who has never spoken my name." The admission startled her. The word love had slipped out like water breaking through a crack in a dam. She froze, staring at his face. His eyes remained closed, his breathing steady. But she couldn't take it back. Somewhere along the line, her pity had turned into something deeper. Tears pricked her eyes as she leaned forward. "Do you know what Mama says? She says I should not be afraid, that sometimes God uses strange roads to bring us to where we belong. But Obina?" She hesitated, tasting his name on her lips. "What if you never wake up? What happens to me, to our children?" Her voice cracked. She pressed her forehead to his hand, the tears falling freely now. That night she dreamed of him. In her dream, he was standing by the ocean, dressed in white, the wind tugging at his clothes. He smiled at her, warm and gentle, and stretched out his hand. She reached for him, but just as their fingers touched, he dissolved into mist, leaving her alone on the shore. She woke up with her heart aching, tears staining her pillow. The next morning, she resolved to be stronger. She couldn't let despair swallow her. Not now, not with 3 lives growing inside her. But the family wasn't done with her yet. One afternoon, she overheard 2 of the uncles talking in the courtyard. "Those children will complicate things," one muttered. "If she delivers safely, they will inherit everything. We cannot allow it." Another hissed in agreement. "We must find a way to discredit her, or better still," his voice lowered, but Amaka caught the sharp edge of his words, "remove her before the children are born." Her blood turned to ice. She clutched the wall, her breath shallow. They wanted her gone, not just ignored, not just humiliated, erased. That evening she sat by Obina's bedside again, her hands trembling as she spoke. "They want to take our children from me. They want me gone, Obina. If only you could wake, even for one day, to tell them I belong here." Her tears blurred her vision. For a moment she thought she saw it, his finger twitching slightly beneath hers. She gasped, leaning closer, but the movement didn't come again. Still, that tiny spark, real or imagined, lit something inside her. She was no longer just a desperate girl from Surulere. She was the mother of his heirs, and she would not let anyone take that from her. The mansion glittered on the outside, but inside its walls, shadows grew longer. Amaka could feel it in the way servants exchanged quick glances when she entered, in the sudden silence of conversations when her footsteps echoed in the marble hallways. Pregnancy had slowed her down. Her belly was now heavy, making every movement an effort. But her mind was sharper than ever, watching, listening, catching fragments of the family's whispers. One evening, as she was leaving the dining hall, she caught the tall woman, Obina's eldest sister, Lady Ifeoma, speaking to two uncles in hushed tones. Amaka lingered behind a column, straining her ears. "She is a problem," Ifeoma said coldly. "Those children, if they are born, will bind her to us forever. She will sit on our wealth like a queen." "And the chief will not wake," one uncle added bitterly. "So we will be tied to this girl, this nobody, forever. We cannot allow it." Ifeoma's lips curled. "Then let her vanish before the birth. A car accident, a complication at the hospital. Lagos swallows people every day." Amaka's knees weakened. She pressed a hand to her belly, her heart hammering. They weren't just against her, they were planning her destruction. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ornate ceiling, her mind replaying their words. Every creak of the floorboards outside her room made her flinch. Every shadow seemed like a threat. In desperation, she went to Obina's hospital suite again. The machines hummed as always, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. She sat, clutching his hand, her tears falling hot and fast. "Obina, I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I need you. They want to destroy me. They want to take our children. Please, if there is any life left in you, any strength, wake up. Show them I am not alone." For a moment, she swore she felt a faint squeeze of his fingers. She gasped, leaning forward, but then the machines beeped steadily, unchanged. Was it her imagination, or had he truly responded? The next day, the attacks began more openly. A driver almost rammed into her car while she was being taken to the hospital for a prenatal checkup. The doctor confirmed her brakes had been tampered with. Later, her food was brought late, lukewarm, and suspicious. Once, she woke to find the gas left on in her kitchen, though she was certain she had turned it off. Each incident carved fear deeper into her chest. Her only ally was Mamangozi, who, though still weak, sensed the tension. "Nay, don't let them break you," Mama whispered one afternoon, gripping her hand. "Remember what our people say, a tree with roots cannot be easily uprooted. Your children are your roots. Protect them with everything." Amaka nodded, swallowing her fear. But the final blow came during a heated family meeting. Gathered in the vast sitting room, with portraits of the Eze ancestors watching from the walls, Ifeoma stood and pointed at Amaka. "This girl is a fraud," she declared. "We all know Chief has not touched her, so how can she be carrying his children? Unless," she paused for effect, her eyes flashing, "unless she brought them from another man." Gasps filled the room. The accusation hung heavy in the air. Amaka's hands trembled on her belly. "That is a lie," she cried. "The doctor confirmed they are his children." But her words were drowned by murmurs, suspicion spreading like fire. The lawyer rose, his voice steady. "DNA has already confirmed the children are Chief's. The arrangements were made long before his illness. Her position is legal and binding." Still, the damage was done. The family looked at her with open hatred now, not just suspicion. That night, back in her room, Amaka broke down. For the first time, she doubted her own strength. Could she truly fight them all? Could she survive until the children came? But as she wept, a strange resolve began to take root in her chest. They could gossip, they could plot, they could try to erase her, but she was not just Amaka from Surulere anymore. She was carrying 3 lives, and for them, she would fight like a lioness. And in the quiet of Obina's suite, as she held his hand once more, she whispered, "If they want war, they will have it. I will not let them take what belongs to us." The weeks that followed were heavy with tension. Every corridor in the mansion seemed to whisper against her. Every glance from the relatives carried venom. But instead of breaking, Amaka grew harder. The fear that once crippled her became fuel. She began to prepare quietly. First, she befriended some of the house staff, the cooks, the cleaners, the drivers. At first, they avoided her, afraid of siding with the outsider, but she treated them with kindness. She learned their names, asked about their families, shared food with them. Slowly, the ice melted. One night, a driver whispered to her, "Madam, they are planning something. Be careful." Another time, a cook slipped her a note warning her not to eat food sent from Ifeoma's kitchen. Second, she started keeping records. Every insult, every threat, every suspicious incident, She wrote them down carefully in a leather-bound notebook she kept hidden under her bed. She also confided in the family lawyer, who, though bound to the Eze dynasty, seemed to have some sense of fairness. "Protect yourself, Mrs. Ez," he advised quietly one afternoon. "In this family, power is the only language anyone respects. If you show weakness, they will devour you." Those words rang in her head. Her belly grew heavier with each passing day, her steps slower, her back aching, but her spirit stood taller than ever. She refused to be erased. The turning point came during another family gathering. This time they had gathered not in the mansion, but in the family's ancestral home in Enugu. The air was thick with the scent of roasted yam and palm wine, and the walls were lined with pictures of long-dead patriarchs who seemed to frown upon the drama unfolding beneath them. Ifeoma struck first. She stood, her galley towering like a crown, and declared, "This girl does not belong among us. She is a curse, and if Chief does not wake, she will bury us all in shame. We must act before these so-called heirs are born." Voices rose in agreement. Fists pounded on tables. Amaka sat silently, her heart thundering. For a moment she wanted to cry, to run, to hide. But then she remembered Mama's words. A tree with roots cannot be easily uprooted. She rose to her feet. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, the outsider, the girl they despised. "You call me a curse," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You call me a fraud. But let me tell you the truth. I did not ask for this. I did not beg to enter this family. I was dragged here by your own arrangement to save the life of the man you now abandon." Gasps filled the room, but she pressed on, her eyes blazing. "You speak of shame. What shame is greater than turning against the woman carrying your brother's children? What shame is greater than plotting to kill an innocent woman and 3 unborn lives?" Murmurs rippled through the room. Some relatives looked away, guilty. Others glared harder. Ifeoma's face twisted with fury. Amaka lifted her chin. "I will not run. I will not be silent. These children are Obina's blood. They are Eze's by birthright, whether you like it or not. And I," she pressed a hand to her belly, her voice thick with emotion, "I am their mother. If you come for me, I will fight. If you come for them, I will fight until my last breath." Her words echoed through the hall, heavy and unshakable. For the first time, no one spoke. That night, back in her room, she wept, not from fear, but from the release of it. For the first time since signing the marriage papers, she felt like she had reclaimed herself. When she visited Obina's hospital room later, she held his hand tighter than ever. "I am not the same girl you married in silence," she whispered. "I am your wife now, truly, and I will protect what is ours, even if you never open your eyes." As if in answer, his eyelids flickered. Just once, a brief flutter before falling closed again. Her breath caught, a sign, a promise, or maybe just her imagination, but it was enough. She was no longer the desperate girl from Surulere. She was Amaka Eze, mother of heirs, wife of a sleeping giant, and a woman who had found her own strength.